Welcome, traveler of time. Here, on this channel, we bring the ancient world back to life through gentle storytelling, detailed history, and journeys across civilizations that shaped humanity. If you enjoy calming stories of the past and want to keep exploring with us night after night, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps us continue to wander through history together. So, find a quiet place, let your mind rest, and allow the voices of history to guide you. Tonight, we step into the Middle Ages, not through the eyes of kings or knights, but through the quiet life of a serf, bound to the soil, living by the rhythm of the seasons. Together, we will walk through one full year, month by month, and see how life unfolded in a medieval village. Close your eyes if you wish, breathe slowly, and let the story begin. The year begins in silence, with frost lying pale upon the thatched roofs of the village. The fields, stripped bare by winter's hand, stretch outward like frozen seas. A thin smoke curls from low chimneys, carrying the smell of cabbage broth and wood ash. Inside a small hut of timber and wattle, a serf named Thomas stirs from his straw bed. The air inside is cold enough that his breath hangs faintly before his face. His wife Agnes pulls the woolen blanket tighter around their youngest child, who whimpers in sleep. Thomas sits up slowly, his body stiff from labor and from the chill. He pulls on a coarse tunic of rough wool, ties a rope around his waist, and steps into cracked boots that have seen too many winters. As he opens the wooden door, the morning air greets him sharp and biting. Outside, his neighbor Geoffrey trudges toward the byre, shoulders hunched. Cold enough to split stone, he mutters. Thomas manages a weary smile. Colder still before lambing comes. The two share a small laugh, though they know hunger waits more keenly than laughter. January is the time of empty larders. Stores of rye and barley are rationed tightly, and every loaf of bread must be stretched thinner than the last. At the manor courtyard, the bailiff gathers the men. His fur cloak shakes with each barked order. Repair the hedges, mend the tools, cut timber from the forest. No idle hands, no wasted days. So Thomas and Geoffrey march into the woods with others, axes heavy upon their shoulders. The forest is quiet save for the groan of trees and the sudden flurry of crows. Each strike of the axe rings out like a drumbeat. Sap seeps, breath clouds, muscles burn. Yet there is no choice. By midday, the men return with bundles of wood. Agnes has spent the morning spinning wool and patching old garments while children tumble about the yard. She greets Thomas with a thin smile, handing him a bowl of broth. He drinks gratefully, though the taste is weak and bitter. That night, the villagers gather in a long hut to share warmth. The elder, Alan, sits near the fire, his voice rough but steady. In the year of St. Cuthbert, he begins, there was a winter so fierce that rivers turned to stone. Yet still the earth woke in spring. The children lean forward, eyes wide, while the adults sip weak ale, nodding to the rhythm of his tale. Later, Agnes whispers to Thomas as they settle back into their hut. Another year begins. Thomas gazes through a crack in the roof where stars glimmer faintly. God grant it be kinder than the last. The fire dies slowly. The earth sleeps. The people wait. The days lengthen only by heartbeats, and the sun remains weak and pale. February enters the village with icy winds that creep through the chinks of timber walls. The huts groan against the gusts, their thatch trembling, while inside, families huddle close to the hearths that burn low and smoky. Thomas wakes before dawn, stirring embers back to life with a stick of ash wood. Sparks leap like startled insects, then settle into a glow. He places a pot upon the iron hook, pours in a fistful of grain with water, and waits for the thin porridge to bubble. The sound is soft but steady, and the smell, though plain, brings a kind of comfort. Agnes wraps their youngest in wool, murmuring a hymn as her lips barely move. More repairs today? She asks, her voice hushed so as not to wake the others. Aye, Thomas replies. The fences lean. If they are not mended, the oxen will stray, and the bailiff will have our hides. Outside, the village stirs. Chickens scratch listlessly at the frozen ground. The cow bellows low, demanding fodder. Men gather in the manor yard, stamping feet to chase away the chill. The bailiff, tall and sharp-voiced, reads names from a roll. Thomas, Geoffrey, Hugh, North Meadow fences. Agnes and the women spin wool, mend sacks. Others cut timber from the Lord's grove. Mind the wolves. At the mention of wolves, murmurs ripple through the crowd. In these lean weeks, the beasts grow bold, their howls echoing across the frosted fields at night. Only last week, 2 sheep vanished, leaving little more than tracks in snow and a scatter of wool. Thomas trudges toward the meadow with Jeffrey. The ground is stiff, the grass brittle. The fence posts, warped by storms, lean drunkenly, and gaps gape wide enough for sheep or worse. The men set to work, shoulders bent, driving new stakes, weaving branches, tightening ropes. Their hands grow numb, their breaths fog the air. Jeffrey grumbles, though not unkindly. Thinks spring will come early this year. Thomas presses down on a stake with his boot, forcing it deep. It comes when it comes. No sooner for wishing. At midday, they share a meal no larger than a palm. Bread tough as bark, softened in ale, and a sliver of cheese. They eat in silence, eyes drifting to the horizon, minds fixed on hopes of warmer days. Meanwhile, Agnes sits among other women in a smoky hut. Their fingers twist wool into thread, the rhythm as steady as prayer. Conversation drifts from one to another. A cough that will not leave a husband's chest, a child's mischief, a dream of saints visiting in the night. Even here, laughter breaks through the grayness, sudden and bright. One evening, as wind lashes against the shutters, a knock rattles Thomas's door. Jeffrey stands there, breath clouding. Quick, come. A cow calves too soon. Thomas follows to the barn, torchlight flickering across snow. Inside, the cow groans, sides heaving. On the straw lies a damp, still calf. Thomas kneels, rubbing with rough cloth, whispering, "Come now, little one, breathe." At last, with a shudder, the calf coughs, then lifts its head weakly. The mother licks it clean, lowing with relief. "God's mercy," Jeffrey mutters, crossing himself. Back home, Thomas tells Agnes, who smiles faintly. Even in the dead of winter, life begins. As the month wanes, icicles drip from the eaves, the snow recedes into hollows, and the ground softens underfoot. The villagers look to their fields with quiet hope. Soon, the earth will awaken, and their labors will multiply. Thomas stands at dusk, frost glittering like glass upon the furrows. The soil stirs beneath. He whispers, though only the night hears him. March does not arrive with warmth, but with a restless sky. The air shifts between sharp winds and sudden bursts of sun, as if the earth itself cannot decide whether to sleep or wake. Snow lingers in shadows, yet along the hedgerows, tiny shoots push upward, green against the brown. The villagers sense it too. The year's true beginning is near. Thomas wakes earlier now. The mornings are still cold, but the light is stronger, creeping through cracks in the shutters. He stretches his shoulders, stiff from winter's labors, and steps outside. The fields smell of damp soil, heavy and waiting. He knows the time has come to turn the earth. The bailiff summons the men to the manor yard. His parchment scroll crackles in the breeze, but his voice is clear. Plows must be readied, oxen harnessed, seeds measured. Every strip of land turned and sown before the 1st of May. Waste no time, waste no seed. Thomas feels the weight of these words. Grain is life. Without it, there is hunger, and hunger spares no one. He and Jeffrey walk to the barn where the heavy plow waits. Its iron blade, dulled by rust, must be cleaned and sharpened. Wooden handles need tightening, leather straps rebound. They work slowly, checking each part, speaking little, until Jeffrey breaks the silence. "Do you ever wonder," he says, wiping his hands, "whether the land grows tired of feeding us?" Thomas chuckles softly. "If it does, let us hope it forgives." When the plow is ready, Thomas leads the oxen into the field. Their breath steams in the chill, their hooves sinking into softening earth. He presses the plow into the ground, and with a groan the soil turns, dark and rich. The smell rises, sharp and fertile, filling his lungs. Jeffrey follows with his own plow, the 2 furrows stretching side by side, lines of hope carved into the land. At midday, Agnes appears at the field's edge with bread and onion wrapped in cloth. She smiles at the sight of the men straining behind the oxen. "Eat, before you fall into the furrow yourselves," she teases. Thomas takes the bread, grateful, though his hands are streaked with mud. "The oxen outpace us already," he says with a grin. Their children run along the boundary, splashing in puddles, shouting as though the furrows were castles and rivers. Agnes calls after them, but her eyes shine at their laughter, glad for this brief joy after the heaviness of winter. Evenings in March are damp, but the hearth burns brighter now. Neighbors gather in Thomas's hut to share their progress. Some boast of furrows long and straight. Others complain of broken harnesses. Beneath the talk lies shared anxiety. Will the earth accept their seeds or betray them with frost? On Sundays, the priest leads them to the fields, cross held high, sprinkling holy water. Blessed be the soil, blessed be the seed, he intones. The villagers kneel, murmuring their own prayers. Thomas bows his head, whispering, "Bless this ground, Lord, for the sake of my children." One night, as they sit by the hearth, Agnes speaks. "Do you remember last spring, when frost came after sowing?" Thomas nods grimly. "I remember the fields white as linen, and our harvest halved." She places her hand on his arm. "Perhaps this year will be gentler." He squeezes her fingers. "We will endure whatever comes." By the end of March, the fields lie sown, furrows neat and hopeful. Seeds sleep beneath the soil, guarded by prayers and patience. Thomas stands at dusk, gazing at the horizon as the sun sets in bands of crimson and gold. He whispers into the evening air, "Grow well, little seeds. Our lives are bound to yours." April opens with restless skies. Clouds drift swiftly, bringing sudden showers that leave the earth glistening, then scatter to reveal bright sun and birdsong. The village breathes more easily now. Though hunger still bites, hope hums beneath each day, for the fields are sown, and signs of life stir everywhere. The meadows echo with bleating. Lambing season has begun, and with it comes long nights and anxious mornings. Thomas and Jeffrey spend hours in the byre, crouching in straw beside weary ewes. The air is thick with the smell of wool, hay, and new life. One evening, Thomas kneels beside a struggling ewe, her flanks shuddering. "Steady, girl," he whispers, rubbing her side. Agnes stands nearby, holding a clean cloth. At last, with a final push, the lamb slides into his hands, small and trembling. He wipes it quickly, placing it before its mother, who begins to lick it clean. The lamb bleats weakly, and Agnes smiles. "Another mouth to feed, but also another fleece," she says softly. In the following days, lambs totter about on uncertain legs, chasing each other in wobbly play. Children laugh as they watch, mimicking their cries, while mothers call them back to their chores. The fields, though still bare, show hints of green. Tiny shoots of rye push upward, fragile yet determined. Thomas kneels, touching the soil gently. "Grow strong," he murmurs, as though speaking to a child. But April is not only labor, it is also Easter. The holiest time of the year brings the village together in ways few other days can. The priest prepares for weeks, his voice solemn as he leads prayers, recounting Christ's passion. The villagers, weary from hunger and toil, listen with bowed heads, drawing comfort from the promise of resurrection. On Easter morning, the bell tolls across the fields. Families gather in their best garments, though for many that means only a clean tunic or a cloak patched one time fewer. They walk in procession to the small church, its stone walls cool and damp, its altar lit with flickering candles. Hymns rise, voices rough but heartfelt. "Christ is risen," the priest proclaims. "He is risen indeed," the villagers reply, and for a moment, their hunger, their burdens seem lighter. After the service, the village shares what little feast it can muster. Eggs, saved and painted, are cracked in playful contests between children. Bread, baked carefully from precious flour, is passed around. A bit of meat, rare and treasured, is shared between families. Laughter and music fill the air, and for one day at least, the village feels rich. In the evening, Thomas sits outside with Agnes, watching the sky fade into hues of violet. The lambs bleat from the meadows, children chase one another with painted eggs, and the smell of smoke and roasting fills the air. Agnes leans against him, whispering, "It feels almost like heaven for a day." Thomas nods slowly. Perhaps heaven is nothing more than a day when no one is hungry and no one is afraid. The night settles gently over the village, and April's promise lingers, of life renewed, of faith restored, of seeds and lambs and people all beginning again. May arrives with color. The hedgerows bloom, dotted with white flowers, and the meadows ripple with green grass and wild herbs. Birds fill the air with song, as though to drown out the silence of winter. The villagers breathe easier, for though hunger has not vanished, the land itself now offers small gifts: nettles, herbs, mushrooms, eggs from hens that lay more freely in the lengthening days. Thomas walks the edge of his field at dawn, the sky glowing rose and gold. The rye has begun to rise, pale blades trembling in the breeze. He kneels, pressing his hand into the soil, moist, warm, alive. He murmurs a prayer, crossing himself before standing to begin the day's labor. The bailiff has declared that every man must give long hours now, for weeds must be pulled and furrows cleared of stones. Thomas and Geoffrey bend low, hands busy, backs aching. They joke occasionally to lighten the work. "If I ever see another stone," Geoffrey grumbles, holding up a rock from the soil, "I'll hurl it at the devil himself." Thomas chuckles. "The devil will thank you for building him a wall." Nearby, Agnes and other women weed the garden plots, their skirts tucked high. Children help by carrying baskets of stones to the edges of the fields, though more often they play, distracted by butterflies and beetles. Agnes sighs but smiles, for children must be children, even when hunger still shadows them. As the days grow longer, evenings bring gatherings in the meadow. Villagers sit in circles, weaving garlands of flowers. A maypole is raised, decorated with ribbons dyed in faint colors. Music drifts from flutes and simple drums, and laughter rings as youths dance, their feet kicking up dust. Even Thomas, weary from toil, feels his heart lighten watching his eldest daughter skip in circles, hair crowned with daisies. One afternoon, the priest blesses the fields again, sprinkling holy water and chanting psalms. He pauses before Thomas's furrow, laying a hand on his shoulder. "The Lord sees your labor," he says gently. "Trust that it will not be in vain." Thomas bows his head, murmuring thanks, though his mind drifts to past years when blight struck or hail shattered the crops. Faith is strong, but memory is stubborn. At night, the family eats more than in winter. Porridge thickened with greens, eggs boiled firm, bread with a touch of honey gifted from a neighbor who keeps bees. The children eat quickly, smacking lips, and Agnes's eyes soften to see them with fuller bellies. One evening, Thomas sits by the door, listening to the hum of insects and the faint laughter from neighboring huts. Agnes joins him, laying her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder," she asks softly, "what life would be if we were free of the land?" Thomas thinks for a long moment. The night air smells of blossoms, the sky glows with stars. "Freedom would be sweet," he admits. "But the land is our prison, and also our bread. We are tied to it, for worse and for better." Agnes sighs, but does not argue. Together they watch fireflies drift across the meadow, their glow like tiny prayers carried into the darkness. By the end of May, the fields are tidy, the crops stretching higher, and the village feels suspended between hope and fear. All depends on the summer to come, the sun, the rain, the whims of sky and soil. But for now, the air is sweet, the blossoms rich, and even the poorest soul feels the promise of life renewed. June stretches wide and golden. The days are long now, the sun rising early and sinking late, so that work seems endless and light never fades quickly. The air is warm, carrying the hum of bees and the smell of hay drying in the fields. For the villagers, June means haymaking. Without hay, the oxen and cows will starve in winter. Without animals, there will be no plowing, no milk, no meat. So every able body, young and old, joins in the labor. At dawn, Thomas takes his scythe, its blade freshly sharpened on a whetstone, and walks into the meadow. Beside him, Geoffrey hefts his own, sighing as he stretches his back. "We'll be bent like old oaks before the day is done," he mutters. The meadow sways with tall grass, dotted with red poppies and blue cornflowers. The men begin their work, sweeping their scythes in long arcs. The sound is steady, almost like music. Swish, swish, swish. The grass falls in waves, and the smell of cut hay fills the air, sweet and sharp. Behind them, women and children gather the fallen grass into heaps, spreading it to dry under the sun. Agnes ties her hair back with a cloth, working briskly, while the children laugh, tumbling in the piles before being scolded back to their tasks. By midday, sweat drips from every brow. Thomas pauses, leaning on his scythe, gazing at the wide meadow now half shorn. The oxen graze nearby, tails flicking lazily. Geoffrey trudges over, holding out a jug of watered ale. "Drink, or you'll fall with the grass." They sit together under the shade of a tree, sharing bread and cheese brought from home. Agnes joins them, her hands red from work, but her eyes bright. "The children have gathered more grass than you two," she teases. Thomas grins faintly. "Let them plow the fields next, then." In the evenings, when the hay is piled high and the day's labor ends, the villagers gather around the common fire. Someone plays a flute, another beats a drum, and songs rise into the warm night air. Children chase fireflies, lovers steal glances, elders nod in rhythm to the music. The smell of smoke and grass clings to their clothes, but the laughter is fresh and full. On Sundays, the priest preaches beneath the open sky, for the church cannot hold the whole village at once. His voice carries across the meadow. "As you gather hay for your beasts, so too does the Lord gather you. Remember his care and labor with joy."